Shalom, this is Levi Shore. Welcome back to Sweet Good Torah. All right, today we're going to talk about something that's very, very mystical and very, very terrifying in some ways. And this is more nister, it's more hidden, it's not talked a lot, especially in yeshiva, especially when I was in Kollel. I didn't hear a lot about this. We're in the time of Shovavim. So what does that mean? So Shovavim means when we're reading Parsha, so it's the first letter of these Parshas. When we're reading Parsha Shmos, Vayera, Bo, Bishalach, Yisro, Mishpatim, we're in a special leap year this year, so we also add the Shovavim Tat, and it's also going to include Parshas Truma and Tetzaveh. All right, so Parsha Shmos, it talks about when we became enslaved in Egypt, so it's talking about the Gullus and how we get into the Gullus. And then, as Hashem brings on the Makos, the 10 plagues, it's the beginning of the Gula. And Shvat, the month we're in right now, Shvat, is the month where the Gula begins. And we're in the month of Tu B'Shvat's coming up very soon, in a couple of days. And Tu B'Shvat is a very special time in the winter where the very first blossom, the sap, begins to create that blossom in trees. So the fruit it's the very first instant when the fruit's going to be born, and that's on Tu B'Shvat. And so this is all the seeds, the beginning of the Gula, beginning of redemption, the beginning of the coming of Mashiach. And a lot of this is very hidden. So we're going to talk about the Arizal, we're going to talk about the mystical and secret reasons why we were enslaved, and how we got freed from Egypt. There's a secret story, underneath the story we're all familiar with. It's dealing with a very serious issue that is unfortunately very prevalent in our days. And it's the aveirah of zerah levatala, of wasting seed for a man. And we're going to talk about this. And it's just, so I'm going to jump right in. But I'm going to talk about how serious it is, because the truth is, like, I went to Beth Phil, so I went to a modern Orthodox day school for a little bit, but mainly I was in like public school, like everyone else, and then I went to college, university. So I went to Emory University and University of Miami, and I also learned a couple other universities, computer science. So I very much grew up in the secular culture, and I worked in the film and television industry, so I understand very much like what we're all immersed in, and when I worked also at IBM, so I was there before the internet became public, so it's interesting, I got to see the internet. Many Rosh Yeshivas, so Rav Mattisyahu Solomon Sal, who unfortunately was just nifter recently, he fought a great battle that, especially for Bakrim, he didn't want them on the internet at all, and he wanted the communities, the yeshiva world, the frum communities, to refrain from the internet, and it's good eitzah. And many Rosh Yeshivas will, so Bakrim, in some ways, the students at yeshiva, they're very shielded in some ways from the internet, but all these issues become very dangerous when, even if someone's learning in yeshiva, when you come into the working world and maybe you're using the internet for work, and you're just exposed to just a vast amount of information. So I heard Rav Pinchas Winston, he said something interesting. He compared the internet to the Eitz Das Tov Ra, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And I think that's it's a good description of it, because there's much good on there. You can learn Torah on the internet, but there's much evil too, and we'll talk about that. I'm going to be a little more explicit. I'm more direct than I usually am. Usually I talk about these things with like euphemisms, but I think it's a dangerous thing, so I'm going to try to be a little more direct. But we live in a world where the internet, there's things out there. There's Pornhub, and there's OnlyFans, and I'm sure there's a lot more than that. That's just what's reported on the news. And so there's a lot, and then even with like things like Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO. So there's a lot of pritzus. There's a lot of, people dress, let's say, without a lot of clothes, and that's a very dangerous thing. In maintaining a Torah life, maintaining, the positive spiritual energy of kedusha, of holiness and tahara, of it's described as spiritual cleanliness, meaning we only want to draw down the positive spiritual energy of kedusha and tahara, and then the battle is going to be against the evil or the negative, dark spiritual energies of tuma, and that's what's generally channeled into kishuf, into sorcery and magic. Crazy. I'm telling you, it's going to be mystical. Okay, so the seriousness of the aveirah, of wasting, of zerah livatala, of wasting, seed, is said in the Gemara. It's said it's keneged kulo aveiros. It's horrible. It's very serious. It's like this is the aveirah that's weighed against all the rest of the aveiros. So this is the worst one. Now the immediate remedy is, okay, if that's the worst aveirah, what's the greatest mitzvah? So the greatest mitzvah is Talmud Torah, is learning Torah, and that's keneged kol ha-mitzvos. So learning Torah is considered as great as all the rest of the mitzvos. Why is that? Why is learning Torah such a powerful mitzvah? Because when we learn Torah, when we learn especially the Chumash, we learn how to do the 613 mitzvahs deraisa, the mitzvahs that Hashem commanded us, gave us in the Torah. And then when we study the Torah Shobal Peh, the Mishnah, the Mishnayos, the Mishnah, the Gemara in the Talmud, and then the Halacha, then we learn, even, the mitzvahs Dirabanan, the special 7 mitzvahs that the rabbis added. It brings us up to 620, if my math is correct. And so Torah is going to be one of our greatest weapons in the battle against all this. Now, I said I grew up in public school, and we live in a society now, especially now more than ever, where aveirah, and especially aveirahs of physical pleasure, are considered mitzvahs by society, and we hear a very, very different hashkafa, a very different perspective on the world. I remember, I think they even taught us this when we were in middle school, and it's very scary how young they want to teach children now in public school about physical relations and things that's not appropriate for children. They should have a nice childhood and innocence, and it's scary times we live in. But I remember I think it was middle school. It may have been freshman year of high school. I forgot exactly, but they took us into sex ed classes, which in some ways is very inappropriate for public school to be teaching these things. It really should be taught by parents. And they told us that sex is healthy, and masturbation. So the very aveirah of zerah livatala, of wasting the male zerah, the male seed, that's healthy. Everything's healthy, and really ingrained in some of us when we were young that this is good, and so it's going to be hard for a lot of us. I can't even imagine when I was secular, if I heard a share like this, what my immediate reaction would be. But okay, so we're going to talk about the Arizal, and he wrote in a Sefer Shaar Ruach HaKodesh, and it's an amazing Sefer. And it tells a person what they must go, what spiritual steps you need to take to gain Ruach HaKodesh, to gain divine inspiration. So it's a communication with Hashem. It's on a lower level than nevuah, like prophecy, but this is a higher form of divine communication. And so we're going to go into this. The Arizal was Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, and he lived in Sfas in northern Israel, I think around the 1600s, and it was an amazing time of Mekubalim, of Kabbalists. Rabbi Yosef Karo, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch, one of the main sefers of halacha. The Al-Sheikh, Rabbi Al-Sheikh lived there, who was a master of Agadita. You had Rabbi the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, another renowned Kabbalist, and then the Arizal student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, who wrote down, the works of the Arizal. So you had many incredible, Torah Gedolim living in Sfas at that time. And this is going to be a little more mystical. It's very terrifying, but we're going to talk about, okay, first maybe let's take a look, let's see where in the Torah, where does the Torah teach us about this mitzvah lo ta'aseh? Where do we see that there's a commandment not to do this? All right, so we're going to go into Sefer Bereshis. We're going to go into the book of Genesis. If If you want to look it up for yourself, it's Bereshis Lameches. I think it's Pesukim Vav through Yud. So that's the book of Genesis, chapter 38, and it's verses 6 to 10. So we'll go through these Pesukim a little bit and we'll talk about it. So it says, Vayikach Yehuda Isha Le'er Bechoro. So Yehuda, Judah, he took a wife for his son Er, who was his Bechor, who was his firstborn. And it's a special power of the firstborn, that they are more tapped into the spiritual greatness of the father, and someone as great as Yehuda, who was the son of Yaakov, of Jacob. And what was so special, so Er, his name, it's Ayin Resh, and it means awake. Okay, so he could have been awake. He could have carried on the great line of Yehuda. And what was so powerful and so special about this specific line was that this was the line where David HaMelech, where King David would be born out of. So Er could have been maybe even Father David himself, or at least like started the line of King David, and then King David's son is Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, and they're like the cornerstone of like the whole Jewish people. So if he was Er, if he was awake, he could have started this great holy line of kings. And then the wife that Yehuda took, it says Ushema Tamar, and her name was Tamar. Okay, so then it says Vayehi Er Bechor Yehuda. So once again, and it was that Er, the Bechor, the firstborn of Yehuda, is this great spiritual potential, but then he switches the letters around. So instead of Ayin Resh, his actions switched the letters of his name around, and the letters of his name is now Resh Ayin, Ra, evil. So it says, Vayehi Er Bechor Yehuda Ra Be'enei Hashem. He did evil in the eyes of Hashem, and so serious. And Vayemisehu Hashem, and Hashem killed him. Hashem caused him to die. So what did he do? So we're going to see from his brother's actions that he did the same thing. But what he did is he didn't want to start the line of King David. He didn't want to start the line of Mashiach. And that was so evil in Hashem's eyes. And then we're going to see, what is the temptation? What was the physical desires? Why would he not want to be father? He could have even been father of Mashiach, or grandfather, or great-grandfather, the line of David HaMelech, the line of King David. What was the Yetzer Hara? What was the evil impulse in him that prevented him from doing this? So it says, Vayomer Yehuda la'Onan, and then Yehuda says to his brother Onan. So the name Onan is very interesting. So Onan is Aleph, Vav, Nun, Nun. So if we just take the word Aleph, Vav, Nun, it can mean two things, which is very fascinating. It can mean strength. So this could be the second born of Yehuda, and you can have the strength of Yehuda, the mighty lion of Yehuda. You could have strength, but On can also be sorrow. So it can go either way. He can be for strength, or it can be for sorrow. And then it's very scary too, because just as air, awake, can so easily be switched around when we're spiritually sleeping, Torah, so too On, strength, can be when we're not spiritually awake and we let the Yetzer Hara attack us. It can become Aven, become wickedness. The same letters of Aleph, Vav, Nun. So we have this great potential, spiritual potential, but if we're not careful, if we let the Yetzer Hara sneak in there, it can all be switched around. And he said to him, Bo el eshes achicha, come to the wife of your brother. Like, that sounds weird, but we're going to talk about it. It says, Vayabem osa. Now, there's a special mitzvah. Now, we haven't done this mitzvah since the days of Rabbeinu Gershom. And in the Middle Ages, Rabbeinu Gershom, this great gadol of Torah during the Middle Ages, he made certain gezerahs. We're no longer allowed to marry more than one wife. And when he makes that gezerah, then we can no longer do the mitzvah yibum. The mitzvah yibum was, if someone had a brother, and this is when you can have multiple wives, if someone had a brother, and that brother never had children, there's a special mitzvah yibum where now he can marry the widow of his brother, and through yibum, during their marriage of kedushin, he can now bring children into the world, and they'll be the spiritual children of his brother. It's a very, very mystical concept. It's something that we're not very familiar with because we haven't had this since the days of Rabbeinu Gershom. I think, it will be restored in the future during Yemotza Mashiach, during the days of the Messiah, Mashiach. And then it says, the next part of the pasuk, so it says, Vayabe Mosa, you should perform the mitzvah Yibum with her, Vahakem zerah leachicha, and then you will be able to establish children, or the seed of your brother. Your brother will now be able to have spiritual children in the world. And this is scary. So then, Vayeda Onan, Ki lo yihya hazara. And it's hard to understand his thinking, but it was like, Onan knew that they would not be his children. It's just so strange, because even they're physically going to be his children. He's going to raise them. They're going to be his sons and daughters, but they would spiritually still be attached to his brother. And it's so strange, and he didn't want to do that. V'haya imba el eshes achiv, and if he did come to his wife, so anytime he slept with his wife, the wife of his brother, v'shichetz artza, and he would destroy his seed on the ground. And what the and so levilti nasan zerah liachiv, because to not give children for his brother. So one thing, it's just such a, this is his brother that was killed, and his brother was killed for the very same aveirah. And what was the aveirah? So the Midrash fills us in here, what's going on behind the scenes, that Tamar was extremely beautiful. She was one of the most beautiful women that ever lived. And it's so sad, but even in Kedushin, even in holy marriage, they both didn't want to spoil her looks, that she would have children. And it was so evil in Hashem's eyes to not want to have children, and especially to have children that are going to be in the line of David HaMelech, if not David HaMelech himself, if not King David himself, all for physical pleasure, all because they didn't want to destroy the beauty of Tamar. And it's really, it's just so sad. Okay, so we'll just finish here, but Vayera be'enei Hashem, and this was evil in the eyes of Hashem, Asher Asa, what he did, Vayames Gam Oso, and Hashem also killed him. It's in some ways it's so hard to understand. But it shows us the danger of zerah levatala. So I'm going to be a little more explicit here because it's important for people to really understand this. Even in a marriage, so Bezrat Hashem, in a marriage, a kedushin, the husband and wife, they can have children, and they can fulfill the mitzvah of pru revu, be fruitful and multiply. But in a marriage, if a man, chas v'shalom, he just wastes his seed to bring pleasure to himself, not to bring pleasure to his wife, but just for his own pleasure, it's the aveirah of zerah levatala. Now, there, sometimes in a marriage, the husband and wife, they may ask a shaila of their rav, of their rebbe, because sometimes physically, sometimes it can be dangerous for a woman to have children. Sometimes it could be emotionally too hard, for a woman, she's having a hard time taking care of the kids she has. So these are personal questions that, a husband and wife will work out, with their rabbi, with their rav, their rebbe. So we're not going to delve too much into those, areas, but most of the aveirahs of physical pleasure in the world, right, if it's not in the bounds of kedushin, of a husband and a wife, and there's two aspects of it. There's the mitzvah of pru revu, but there's also a mitzvah of onah. It's very fascinating, right? The same lashon, but there's also the idea there's a mitzvah to bring pleasure to your wife, and that's a good thing, to give your wife a good feeling. And so everything in society that we see now that are outside these bounds. So we see, right, so there's the mitzvah, lo ta'aseh, the negative commandment that the two men, should not, shichav ish, I think, I forgot how it's phrased exactly, but it's a mitzvah that two men should not have relations, because that is always going to be zerah levatala, and it's always going to be destroying, and there's no potential of children in that. and that's also, it's very serious. So it's interesting. So two women, I really don't want to talk about these things, but with two women together, it's not necessarily the destroying the zerah livatala. I have heard it's possible, women also have, they also have, a seed which is in the nida process, in the menstrual process. If they don't have child that month, their seed comes out. It does say in the Gemara that it seems like to be, it's not good in the sense of it trains them to not, then be married to a husband. So it just puts them on a path where they're not, finding a husband. And then, of course, anyone outside them, any man outside of marriage, if they're, pleasuring themselves, or if they're, there's noose, like where people just have relations, the whole Indian of like boyfriends, girlfriends, and all these categories, which I don't want to get too much into, but there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of zerah livatala in society right now, and we live in a society where it's really saying that these aveirahs, these sins, are healthy, and in some ways they're even saying they're mitzvahs. And there's big parades sometimes to celebrate. People should be proud of this, and it's very difficult. I know it's a very difficult subject. I don't want to get too far into all these different aspects. I want to focus just on this one period of Shovavim and a special time of, where, we can bring the tikkun and the fix. Okay, so if you're still listening and you're not totally horrified, we're going to go into some more mystical aspects, and we're going to see like what a person can do if they fell into this trap. I mean, the first step is hopefully seeing that, right, this is very dangerous aveirah, and it's very harmful. One reason it's harmful, and it's not always immediately apparent, is because on the mystical side of things, in the level of Kabbalah, Hashem's created spiritual worlds above the physical world we live in. So Earth, on planet Earth, the physical world is called the world of Asiya, the world of making, meaning everything's created for us here in this world, and then we can make into other things. So for instance, like we can cut down a tree, make it lumber, build a house, we can make bricks, we can take even like chemicals, the elements that Hashem's given us, we can smelt down the metals and make, objects from that. We can, woodcraft, stonecraft. Chemists, chemists can, mix together different chemicals, create medicines, pharmaceuticals. You can take, in the world of physics and engineering, you can take study the laws of physics, and we can engineer technology. So there's all kinds of incredible things we can do in the world of Asiya. And above us is these spiritual worlds, the spiritual world of Yetzirah, the world of the Galgalim, the planets and the stars, and Beriah, the world of the Malachim, the angels in front of Hashem's Kisei HaKavod, and above the world of Beriah is the world of Atzilus, even beyond and above Hashem's throne. And then it gets so high, there's Adam HaKadmon, and then we can barely conceive. And even though there's an infinite amount of spiritual worlds above us, these are the five that Hashem's given us, attached to His holy name of Yud He Vav He. And when we do mitzvos, we bring these spiritual constructs in these higher spiritual worlds together, and this creates good things. This creates a good spiritual flow that we talked about, a shefa, a good spiritual flow of bracha, of blessing, and we can bring down kedusha, holiness, into ourselves and into our surroundings, into the day. We can even makadesh time, for the Rosh Chodesh, for the mitzvah of doing Kiddush Levano on the new moon. When we make Kiddush on Shabbos, we can the holiness of Shabbos, and we can bring that holiness into Yom Tovim, like Pesach, like Passover, and Sukkot, and Shavuos, and all the great Yom Tovim, the Yom Tovs. So all these amazing things. And when we do mitzvahs, we bring these spiritual constructs together. We open up the channels of the good spiritual light coming into the world, and things are great. But chas v'shalom, and especially with this aveirah, and that's why Hashem was taking it very, very seriously, this only leads, unfortunately, to death. It leads not to the Eitz Chaim, not to the tree of life. Unfortunately, there's the back evil, or the klipos, the shells around it, and it's the Eitz Maves, the tree of death, chas v'shalom. And that's why this was so serious. That's why this aveirah has to be taken seriously, because it only produces death, because it doesn't produce life. Life can only be produced in Kedushin, in a holy marriage. I mean, I know life can come life can come in these other ways, but it's not going to be as elevated. It's not going to be, the elevation of the neshamas that we're looking for. And that's another illusion that can be very deceiving also. Okay, so let's talk about the Arizal in his Shaar Ruach HaKodesh, and what's the fix? What's the tikkun? What's the spiritual fix in this time of Shovavim? Now, I'm going to say what the Arizal says. It's even harder than this. Okay, just don't freak out, because I'm going to talk about some more practical things we can do. Okay, so the Arizal, he says there's a minhag before Yisrael, before the Jewish people. Okay, hold on your seats. To fast 40 consecutive days in the Shovavim period. We're going to talk about fasting. I know 40 days it's overwhelming, but it's even focused on maybe if someone even takes on one fast during the day, during this period. Right, but so 40 days that are from the first day of Parsha Shmos until Parsha Teruma, and the siman for this is Shuvu Banim Yeshovavim. So return my wayward sons, return my wayward children. Right, so it's the Shuvu, it's the return, the Banim of the children, and they are now the returners. They're the Baal Teshuvas. They're the ones that are returning to Hashem, returning to Torah and mitzvos. There was a great song by Kansas. I loved it in the 70s. He said, "Carry on, my wayward sons," which I think is the wrong message. It's really return, my wayward son. There'll be peace when you are done. When the Shovavim return, then we're going to have real shalom. Then we're going to have peace. It says, on a stormy sea of moving emotion. That's true. We all the temptations swirling around us, and there's a lot going on that internet. We talked about it. Some of these sites that we want to stay away from. And Chas v'shalom, we can. And unfortunately, I've been in this situation because unfortunately, in the last 2 years, my wife wanted a divorce, so I've been dealing with this. The Torah says it's not good for a man to be alone. And Bezrat Hashem, I will get married soon in the future, and won't be in the stormy sea of moving emotion. But it's a dangerous time being alone. It can be dangerous. I mean, people can get depressed. They feel lonely, and this is when the Yetzer Hara can attack. And unfortunately there's too many. These not so good ports on the stormy sea. So he said, I tossed about. I'm like a ship on the ocean, and the neshama is called like a ship that goes out on the ocean. We're in this spiritual peril, but we want to make it to the safe port. And it says nothing equals the splendor. Nothing equals the splendor of Tiferes and Yesod when we can, conquer this. Now your life's no longer empty. Surely heaven waits for you. And if we can conquer it, Shemaim's waiting, Olam Haba's waiting, and we can bring the Motzei Mashiach if we can conquer this. But if we are not carry on, but return my wayward sons. Shuvu Banim Yeshovavim. And that's right, if you want to look it up, that's from Yirmiyahu Gimel Kaf Beis. So it's in Jeremiah. It's chapter 3, and I believe it's verse 22. Okay, so saying the ikar of the fast, these 40 days, is to masakein, to fix the avon, the aveirah of carry, of seed that's wasted, and it's more than the rest of the year. So this Shovavim time is a special time. He says these days are masugalim. They're treasured, precious times, specifically created to fast for carry, to fast for the zerah levatal, for wasting seed. He says this is the reason for the Golus Mitzrayim. Now we see with Yehuda's sons that we see a little bit of the secret reason that we were exiled in Mitzrayim, the misusing of seed, the giving into physical temptations. And this is one of the things that brings us into Golus. This traps us in exile. And it says these are the Netzutzos. This is very interesting. These are the sparks, the holy spiritual sparks of the neshamos, of the souls that went out from Adam Harishon, from Adam the first man. And these are he says, the 130 years that he was separated from his wife. So a lot of people don't know this. It's midrashim that after Adam and Chava, after they ate from the eights of Das Tovara, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And it was interesting. We talked about Rabbi Winston comparing that to the internet. Another interesting thing about the internet is in the Hebrew year of 1996 is when they were building the Migdal Bavel, the Tower of Babel. And the internet was publicly released in the year 1996. And there's probably there's a great connection there because like Google, but the reconnecting of people through all around the world, just as everyone was split in the Dor Flaga, that generation of building the tower, everyone was split into 70 different nations and languages. Now, with like Google Translate and these other things, like people are coming together and having conversations from all over the world again. But once again, it's knowledge, but good and evil on there, and we have to be careful. And now this is going to be very mystical, very terrifying. It's going to sound maybe like Lord of the Rings if you're coming from more of a secular background. But during the 30 years, he was separated from Chava. So after they ate from the fruit and they were kicked out of Gan Eden, they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, like Adam was very mad at his wife, Chava, Eve, and he wanted to be separated from her. He wanted a divorce from her. But during those 130 years, he was doing the aveirah of zerah levatala. He was wasting seed. And now this is very strange. So what actually happens when we do that, right? So if someone wastes this seed, chas v'shalom, it cannot produce a baby, but this is strange. It produces spiritual children. And it produces shadim and ruchim. And it says in the Gemara, I believe it's Masechta Chagiga. I haven't learned this in a bit, but malachim, angels who live, we talked about, in the world of Berea, spiritual world high above us, in front of Hashem's Kisei HaKavod, they're very purely spiritual beings, and they don't really disobey like the word of Hashem, okay? And they don't have it in them. And I've heard them described as like spiritual robots, but they're very, very elevated spiritual beings, and they don't have the Yetzer Hara, they don't have the Satan, they don't have that because the Malach who's in charge of evil is one of their peers. So it's just like he's one of their friends. He's not inside them enticing them, he's just one of them. And his job is evil, their jobs are all other things. So they don't have that. They don't have that. The whole idea of rebellion in the Malachim, it's not a Torah idea. It's like these are the Malachim are all the Avadim, they're all the servants of Hashem, and so too are the Shindalids, the demons, right? I know, it's strange, right? But demons are spiritual creatures. Now this is very strange. They're half physical, half spiritual. So they're not as elevated as Malachim, but they're not. So then what are we? So we have great potential because what we are is very interesting. The demons, the Shindalids and the Ruchin, they're going to be more of like wind creatures. I don't know, very interesting thing. Maybe the damaging winds. You ever feel that wind chill? That could be one of the Ruchin coming at you. But they're like this mix, this like compound of spiritual and physical. Now what we are is very interesting. We're made in the Tselem Elokim, the image, the Demus Adam. So the 10 Sephiros, I'm not going to go into it so much right now, but the 10 Sephiros are in the form of a person, the person's head, the arms, the torso, the legs. So we're in that Tselem Elokim, we're in that form. So our neshama, our souls are in the form of the 10 Sephiros. And there's 5 different levels of the neshama, of the soul, and we're not going to go into that so much right now. But, right, so we are who we really are is spiritual creatures. We are spiritual creations. We're really the nefesh, the ruach, the neshama. See, I am going, sorry. The chaya, the yechida, the 5 levels of the soul. That's who we really are. That's our consciousness. That's our thoughts, our feelings. It's all coming from our feelings, our emotions come from the 7 lower spheros, and our thoughts, our machshava, our intellect comes from the top 3 of the spheros, and that's who we really are, but we're in a physical body. So we're not an exact mixture of physical and spiritual like the Shindalids, like the demons, but we are spiritual beings, so we're like a malach in a sense, but we're in a physical body. And then how we have such great potential is because when the neshama, when the spiritual desires and the spiritual intellect can overcome the physical desires, then we can even be greater than the malachim, greater than the angels. It's a pretty startling idea. But unfortunately, Adam Rishon, during these 130 years, he was producing these and the okay, I don't know. There's the queen of the demons. Her name begins with the Lamed. We're not supposed to say these names because it gives power to the Sitra Achra, the other side. So I'm not going to go. Maybe eventually we'll do a shiur about it. There's Rebbeim out there on the internet you can find that do a lot of shiurs on this. But this was it was T-post keri. It was drops of keri, wasted seed, and that's how it produced these spiritual creations, negative spiritual creations. We produce malachim, interesting enough, through mitzvos. When we do mitzvos, we can produce malachim. And so what's dangerous about this all, what's dangerous about zerah levatala, is because these negative spiritual children, comes from these shin daleds, and the lost, sparks that could have become children that are lost and trapped by the negative spiritual forces, right? That can start draining a person because they drain whatever kedusha we have. They drain it out of us, and it can make us weak. It can make us sick. This is the spiritual root of all sickness in a way, and probably it is. It's probably the spiritual root of all sickness, of all illness, and this is really this is the key to all health, all healing, the secret, the real secret of controlling physical desires. Now, these were nisakno, these were fixed in the Golus Mitzrayim. So what we did through that exile, and it shows you that what's so difficult, what's so challenging is to fix all this, to fix this spiritual damage. We had to be enslaved, doing this hard, grueling work, night and day, and that was part of the fix. And therefore, at the time of these parshios, is a time of parishus. We were separated from our wives in some ways because, like, the men were enslaved and they're out in the fields. Now, the holy women of Yisrael, the Jewish women, they came out to the fields and they were still producing children in Kedushin, which is an amazing thing. But this time of Shovavim for us, it's a little time of separation. Not a person doesn't have to separate from their wives. It's the normal cycle of that. But we can at least separate, and we see why the fast can be important. So it's mesugal, it's a segula, it's a remedy, a spiritual remedy, supernatural cure, to receive teshuva of Adam Arishon and of us, hamisana, like fasting in them, for the avon of keri, for the aveirah of wasting seed, and therefore this begins from the Parsha Shmos. When we're enslaved in the Parsha, the time of Shovavim, it begins that week. And because this Parsha is the beginning of the shibud, of the slavery, and is concluded in Parsha Mishpatim, this year it goes, we said, longer to Terum and Tetzaveh. And he says, I'll explain. So then he goes into a much deeper explanation. Okay, so this seems like almost overwhelming. So what can we practically do? Okay, so there's a lot of steps. I mean, if we can come up to the madrega of the Roshei yeshivas, the head of the yeshivas, and the bakrim in yeshivas, it's good, right? You're very protected when you're yeshiva. You can be just disconnected from the internet, and then you're just not adding these temptations, these taivas, these desires into your life. So a complete separation from the internet, cold turkey, that's very helpful to a lot of people. Okay, but unfortunately, aveirah didn't start with the internet. Aveirah is all around in the world. So a lot of things you're going to hear talked about in yeshiva are things like shemiras ha'ayin. This is very important. Protecting your eyes. Don't look at women. Don't, especially like a woman you're not married to. Even your wife, it says even your wife you're not supposed to, look at so much. But, you have a beautiful wife, Baruch Hashem, you should look at your beautiful wife, praise her for her beauty, praise her for her great intellect, praise her for all she does for you. Build your shalom bias. But outside your marriage, you should not be looking at women, not be looking at women chas v'shalom in real life, especially very dangerous. Do not be looking too long on the wife of someone else. And this is difficult. We live in the age of social media. We live in the age of, even television and radio and even movies, they seem like outdated. These are outdated things. And, in the 21st century, the communications is social media. But it's the age of pictures. It's the age of chitzonios, of outside appearance. And we are just inundated with it. We're inundated with images. Like, even if you go to news sites, secular news sites, I noticed ABC News, Fox News, like, they have so many ads of like immodestly dressed women. Just and even on news sites, there's not that elevation in society anymore. There's not that moral elevation. So it's all around. And then we talked about it. I'll mention again briefly, but there's very lowly, very dangerous places on the internet, and all kinds of things like, Pornhubs and OnlyFans, and these are very dangerous for people. And for things that dangerous, if a person's fallen into those dangers, a person must really mechazik himself. He must strengthen himself to break away from that for sure. But then, so then, besides a complete cold turkey from the internet, cutting down on hours, being very specific, creating a seder of exactly why are you on the internet? What are you there to do? What are you there to accomplish? How long are you going to be on there? Setting time. Well, web filters, extremely helpful. A good remedy that some people have is like sharing account with a wife. So like a person's not going to go where they shouldn't go because it's the same account that their wife's on. Next step is going to be shmiras halashon, being very careful how we speak. And so this is also dangerous. Not listening to nevel peh, people not speaking in using bad words, curse words, we call them. And you'll hear it a lot. And you go above I think even in PG-13 movies now, there's a lot of not so great words sometimes, and then R and woof, and you go above, and then so you're not hearing nice speech, and you're hearing a lot of lashon hara, especially in the news media. It's lashon hara, it's motzi shemra. It's speaking true things that are very cruel about other political opponents, and then even untrue things is motzi shemra. Lashon hara is true, but it's evil talk, and then motzi shemra is untrue, evil talk, and the whole political spectrum. It's horrible. It's like, the news is very biased. So you either have left-wing news or right-wing news, and they want you to hate not only just the politicians on the other side, but they want you to hate all the voters on the other side, and it's causing just a lot of fighting and riva, contention, and just it's very scary time. So society itself around us, like it says before the coming Mashiach, it says in Masechta Sota, last Mishnah, that the Malchus itself, the kingdom, the government will turn to minos, it will turn to heresy, and we see even the secular Israeli government, the secular government in America and Europe, all around the world, they are promoting aveirah in some ways, in some aspect, promoting sin, promoting atheism a lot, and not always promoting coming closer to Hashem, coming closer to the holy creator, the infinite being that's created all of us and sustains all of us. So we're not getting a good message even from surrounding society, and it's a lot going on. The more that we can separate from all this, the more that we can not take it all in, the better. And it's good. Hey, you just talking to your family, talking to your friends. Best be in a base midrash, be in a base knesset, go to shul, go to synagogue, daven, talk to Hashem. Elevate yourself, learning. And even if you're not that religious, there's so many kiruv rabbis and rebbitzins all around the world that are just more than happy to teach any Jewish person Torah and mitzvos. I mean, it's just the opportunities are there, even on the internet here. If you're watching this, you're B'ezrat Hashem learning some Torah here, and Torah anytime. I think there's another one. I have to get the name of it. So there's opportunity even on the internet for Torah, for good. But it's surrounded by a lot of ra, so we have to be very careful. And all these things are helpful. Okay, so 40 days in a row is pretty hardcore. But here's what I'm going to suggest. Especially if you're really falling in this trap, this could be very, very powerful. Fast one day, okay? And I'm going to tell you something. So people will say this. People say if it's going to affect your learning, if it's going to affect your job, then you'll eat, okay? But realistically, the sunrise is fairly late right now. Get up before the sunrise. Have yourself a nice breakfast, We're really talking about missing lunch for one day. And then like the shkia, Seitzal Kafi, the sunset, and when the stars come out at night, it's not so late. It's really not so late. It's short, very short days right now. This is another benefit, the great rachamim, the great compassion of Hashem, that this is the time. It's very short days, so the fasting is very easy. But I'd say try one fast. The fasting is very important, very powerful, because where people have fallen in the trap of indulging too much in physical pleasure, here we deny ourselves some physical pleasure. We deny ourselves food. And I'm saying, at least try. Try to take on one fast if you can. You really just, if you do it right, you're just missing lunch. Hydrate, prepare yourself the day before, hydrate a lot, eat plenty, you can eat all night if you want, But I'm saying, but just fighting against it, fighting against, the overwhelming, taivas, desires all around us is very powerful. Okay, so, if you have any questions or conversations, please, comment below. And I just think it's very important. I don't really love talking about these things in a public setting, but I think it's very important. There are some Rebbeim that teach a lot about this. It's very important. It's very serious. It's hard for a lot of people to probably hear. It's very much against the grain of where society is right now. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you back again soon on Sweet Good Torah.